Are you ready? Ready to bring a revolution to your relationships? Ready for the experiences on your dating adventure to evolve? Ready for more passion, intimacy, connection, and love in your relationship? Ready to heal past relationship wounds? You're in the right place. I'm Alan, the love engineer, and this is the Relationship Revolutions podcast. In this series, you'll get guidance and tips from me, interviews from other relationship experts, insights from couples who already have a great relationship, and other mind-opening conversations. Known as the EFT Coach, Liz helps people heal from their relationships, money, and trauma wounds, and helps them to transform their past into an empowering, happy, fruitful future. Liz experienced her first of 3 abusive relationships when she left home at just 16. She spent years healing her childhood and family trauma when she discovered EFT tapping, which is known as the emotional freedom technique, after her second child. However, nothing came close to the grief she felt knowing at the end of her marriage was approaching, and the healing she had to do after it did, as well as the post-separation abuse that she'd experienced. After a corporate career with now over 14 years of EFT tapping experience, along with a whole host of qualifications and skills in other modalities and practices, Liz is currently gaining her accreditation as a somatic and narcissistic trauma-informed coach, a leader and hypnotherapist, so her clients have absolutely everything they need to go from move forward from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth and beyond. In this conversation with Liz, we talk about her own experiences in marriage and divorce with her abusive relationships. We talk about parenting and dating as parents, among many other things. And now for my conversation with Liz. So sometimes if I start my normal intro, when I click the record button, it records it from like halfway through. So just generally sort of talk nonsense for a minute, and then it records the bits I want it to.
Sure. I'm on 60%, so that should be enough, shouldn't it? It's a new phone.
Hopefully.
How long are we going for? Like 40 minutes?
As long as the conversation flows, sort of. Okay. I aim to sort of get somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour's good content. Okay. And then some go on for 90 minutes, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Well, I've got until 3. Let me just get the extension just in case. Sorry. Thought I had more thing. There we go. Right. I am ready now, I promise. Bar someone at the door, but I'm not expecting anyone. I've had my deliveries for the day, so fingers crossed. We're all good.
Excellent. Well, if I need to clip any bits out like that, I can do. Not an issue. G'day, and welcome to the latest episode of Relationship Revolutions. And today I am joined by Liz Harrington, the EFT Coach. So first 2 questions, Liz. How are you and where are you?
Oh, thanks, Alan. I am great. I'm really good. It's the first time someone's introduced me by Harrington, which is my new name, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But and where am I? I'm in Buckinghamshire, just outside of London. So sadly it's not that sunny today, but sunny Buckinghamshire, I like to say.
Yeah, spring is in the air, I believe.
It is,
unless it snows by the end of the week. Who knows? It's England. We can have all 4 seasons in one day.
Yes.
So, would you like to share with the listeners a bit about your story and your background? Because I'm guessing that becoming an EFT coach wasn't a thing you did straight after school.
No, it wasn't. So I used to work in HR. and did training and management development stuff, coaching. That's when I first started coaching, really, but obviously more of a corporate aspect, but still people related, lots of relationships, but obviously work ones. And then I had my daughter. I gave up work. I took voluntary redundancy. Didn't have a very nice birth with her. So when I had my second, I had a lot of birth trauma. Was due to have a C-section when I saw this advert for a free birth trauma workshop. So I went along and walked in, and I was late, quite often late. You're laughing because I was late to this. I apologise. I saw these people doing this weird tapping thing, and I just thought, what the hell is this? I was so big, I couldn't really run away. So I had to sit down and join in. And within 20 minutes, I was paired up with a practitioner in training, an EFT practitioner. And within 20 minutes, this crazy thing called emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping, had cured me of my birth trauma. And I went on to have a water birth with Josh. He was a very large baby. And I still screwed the place down, but I didn't need all the intervention that I'd had before, partly because I felt confident and I wasn't traumatised and as scared as hell. So that was my kind of introduction to EFT tapping. I started to use it on myself. I did a training program to enable me to do that, and then just thought, do you know what? I can't do. I had 2 kids under 2. I needed an escape, so I started to train and thought I'm going to have a business. Very much a hobby business at first, but then as the kids got older, it grew. I did have to pull it back quite a lot in the run up to my divorce. And then, and then shortly after that, we had COVID and so on. So it's been bubbling away nicely for a while. But last year, really, it was time to step it up again, which worked beautifully because I have this new niche helping other divorced people, as well as the money mindset stuff, which I've done for many years now. So it's all come together really nicely.
Excellent. And one of the things I find amazing when I speak to people on this podcast is the difference that being a parent or having a challenging relationship has on our career choices. Because I do what I do as a result of a lovely marriage.
Yeah.
With a hint of sarcasm there, maybe.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think I can relate to that totally. Yeah, I mean, I had I think I would never blame it on the children at all, but having 2 children under 2 did put a lot of strain on us as a couple. And I get that my husband wanted to focus on his career. He earned decent money. He worked in the city and so on. He was always doing other things on the side, property and an app business. And so, my business always felt like I described it as a hobby business. It was for many years. And it was just generally helping people with trauma, childhood trauma, phobias, things like that. And I think as our relationship kind of like the wheels came off pretty slowly over like 9 years, but I needed to, and I wasn't blameless at all, so I needed to sort of process what I was going through that I knew was impacting the relationship. My mum had a massive brain hemorrhage, so that was a huge thing. All this stuff that I really wanted love and support from my husband with, but he just didn't really seem to have time for me. And and a lot of that was because he didn't have the time. But when he did have the time, he still didn't seem to have the time, if that makes sense. And so it's led me down this path of doing all of my healing. I just kept thinking, well, it must be me. It must be me. I need to do this healing. I need to work on my relationship with my mother. I need to work on my relationship with my sisters and my dad, and do all this generational healing and hope that it makes a difference to how I am turning out in the relationship. But there's only so much one person can do.
Yeah.
And I think that was really the issue, which was why it was never meant to be, sadly. But not sadly, because I can't imagine still being married to him now.
I can definitely relate to that one.
Yes.
it's interesting you mentioned sort of healing the relationship with your mum and your dad and everyone else. And I think it's something that many people overlook because they're saying, well, that relationship with my dad is because he did this and he showed up this way or didn't show up that way, or my mum did this, my mum didn't do that, or whatever it may be. And very seldom do we sort of look in the mirror and say, okay, I am the common link between all of these relationships. It's going to be easier to heal me than it is to fix them and get them to show up the way that I believe that they should do.
Yeah, you can't change. I mean, in many ways it'd be amazing if we could, but we can't change other people. We can only change how we show up for ourselves, and we can change how we respond. Well, we can change how we react to people and their actions so that we can choose to respond in a different way. And I think that's the key thing. And my relationship with my mum sadly passed away now, but my relationship with my dad is much closer now because I'm able to have honest conversations with him, and I have permission now to tell him when he's droning on about himself and never asking me about me or the children, because I've been able to ask him in a really grounded way rather than throwing my toys out the pram and just feeling really rejected and unloved and annoyed with him, which is how I used to feel. And when I spoke out coming from that place, it never worked. It always resulted in an argument, or usually an argument with my mum because she would stick up for him and dad would just stay quiet. But yeah, that now we can have that open discussion. I mean, I still don't like it. I still don't like having to say, Dad, you're doing it again. But it comes from such a different place that it's actually, it's possible now.
Yeah.
Which is really a gift, because obviously my ex is in my life because he's the father of my children, but I don't have a relationship with him anymore, whereas I do want a relationship with my dad. So do it, and actually going through all the divorce and the post-separation abuse I had afterwards, if I hadn't done all the childhood healing and the healing with my relationship with my parents, I would have had to have done that at the same time as the divorce stuff, because it can get so sort of caught up and messy and mixed up. But there were still bits of it that I needed to do, but the majority of it was focused on me, my patterns in the relationship. So I do feel very blessed to have done that, because otherwise, when you heal from the divorce, it does bring up stuff from your past, from your childhood, and you have to fix those things. You have to heal those wounds, else you will take the same things into your next relationship, which is what I did with someone that I met after my husband to an extent. I met him 9 months after I broke up with my husband, and that was a very toxic relationship, and I didn't realise because I was still so hurt and still healing from the divorce. So that didn't work out very well either.
So I'm guessing I'm not guessing because I know from my own experience, but what I'm hearing is that this inner healing is absolutely crucial for having a healthy relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. I am what's known as an HSP, a highly sensitive person, and highly sensitive people can be really insecure, really paranoid. They can be quite, I don't want to say untrusting, like not naturally, but because of who they are and often the people they attract, they have had experiences that maybe might lead them to be less trusting. And so now I've met someone recently actually, and one of the things I love about him is he is an amazing father. When he's with me, he's not looking at his phone all the time, which is quite refreshing because that's what most people do nowadays. And he's so present, and I love that about him. So I have to be really mindful that when he's with his children, he's the same, because he's really present with them. So he's not checking his phone all the time. So he might not even see my message for a while. Now, the old version of me would have interpreted that as he's not interested, he doesn't care. I've always been very trusting in terms of like not thinking, oh, they're off with another woman or anything like that. perhaps to my detriment with my last relationship. But it's like now I'm able to just talk myself down and go, okay, Liz, this is actually the kind of bloke that you want. Someone who's really present, especially with his children. And you're worrying because, so I can figure out why I'm worrying, what's being triggered in me. Whereas before I would have just gone straight to, why isn't he messaging me back? Or why isn't he messaging me at all? What does that mean? And mind would just be in 360-degree circles, like on a constant replay. Horrendous. I never want to feel like that ever again, because it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. And it's being aware of when it is creeping in a little bit. I don't think we're ever fully healed or fixed. We always have to keep working on ourselves. But now, again, I can, my reactions are different, so I can respond differently. That's the key thing, I think.
Yeah, I think this healing journey, in some ways, it's a little bit like the computer game where you might be playing, say, Sonic the Hedgehog, and the bad guy he has to defeat in level 1 might be the same bad guy in level 7, but it's harder to defeat him because he's got new skills, and so is Sonic and everything else.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that analogy.
In some ways, our body is like Sonic the Hedgehog on a computer screen, and our spirit or soul or wherever that is, because it's not part of our body, it's within us, but it's almost like life is a computer game.
Yeah. No, I really love that analogy. I think that's so accurate, and it's very relatable to a divorce, because you're going through the different levels of divorce, the different processes, and you get more skilled, you get more knowledgeable. They probably do the same, so you might get more pushback. So you're arming yourself with all this knowledge and skill, but also the emotions get higher.
Yeah.
The odds get higher, don't they? There's more to argue about. You're not just arguing about, oh well, how are we going to work seeing the children? What's the split going to be? You're trying to work out your life savings and your house and whatever else might be involved. Other relationships with other people. All of the impact on that. All those things. Mutual friends and stuff. Even families and in-laws. It can get really, really messy. The stakes get higher, don't they, as you go through the levels, I think.
Yeah, and I interviewed Dave Kite, the divorce consultant, on series 1, I think it was, and he was saying there's 3 parts to a divorce. You've got the financial side, you've got the legal side, and you've got the emotional side. And he said the mistake most people make is to go straight to the solicitors for the legal side and think that they're going to handle all 3 parts of it, whereas they're not trained for it.
No,
some of them might be trained with some of the financial stuff, but it's the legal stuff.
Yeah.
And as soon as they get involved, if you've got 2 solicitors that are acting in the best interests of their client, it's going to make a mess.
Absolutely. You see, we see it all the time, don't we? I'm sure I've experienced it. So I've managed to, until quite recently, because after 5 years we are still doing the finances, because at first we did the legal separation and the legal divorce. The finances we agreed between ourselves. I thought I was getting a great deal. We were all very happy, but I didn't get it signed off in a financial consent order. So it was based purely on trust. And then when things started to get a bit difficult, actually after I split up with the other guy that I'd met, and the kids were coming back saying, Dad's got no money, he can't buy us this, and he was always very fair in terms of what he gave us, but it was suddenly like bit by bit sort of pulling back and saying, no, I'm not doing that anymore. It's like, well, you always have. Why suddenly you're not doing it now? And so I dared to question the sorry, my dog's having a roll if you hear any weird noises in the background, but because I dared to question the finances, and I actually realised, you know what, I'm actually exposed here. If he wants to come after my money and my house, because I had bought a house, he'd chosen to rent, we'd sold the family house, I felt exposed. So I just thought, oh, we'll just put it all in a consent order and it'll all be fine. We'll sign it off, everything that we've agreed. And then when the legal paperwork for that had to be filled in, it was a very, very different picture. And ever since then, it's been, another reason for him to come at me and threaten me. I'm not going to pay you if you don't do this, those kinds of things. So my original point in sharing this, which I've gone off track slightly, is so the financial side we hadn't sorted out legally, but then because even though we were amicable at first, the process of trying to sort out the finances has made things really toxic, sadly, which is furthest from whatever, I never wanted that. I never expected that to happen. I think he's hanging on to stuff that happened in the relationship towards the end that I hold my hands up. I wasn't ideal, didn't finish great, but it's like, actually this is about so much more than that, and it was 5 years ago. So it gets really hard, and the emotional healing, the emotional impact is the thing that I think is the most important, because without that, the finances, as I've just explained, that was my point, become so terrible, because the reason we're arguing about them is because he is so emotionally hurt, angry. He hasn't processed his emotions, and after 5 years, I think they've built up into this pressure cooker, and it's the steam's coming out big time. So it is so important, and I think they need to be done in unison. You can't do one without the other.
Because I'm in the place where we've got the consent order done 10 years ago. I'm 99% certain she's done no healing whatsoever, and in her mind, her identity for me was the version of me that was married to her 13 years ago. She doesn't see the man I am today. So that brings challenges in itself.
Yeah, I get that totally. And then I don't know if you have this, Alan, but like, I know that he's got we call them flying monkeys when we talk about narcissists, and family and friends that that he talks to and gets validation from for his feelings. So it gives him the extra sort of he gets that supply from them because he can't get it from me, to really motivate himself to cause issues. And it's it was so devastating when it first happened. I was in an absolute state for quite a long time, and the only thing that has changed is that now I'm strong enough to know what he's doing, to recognize these are the acts of a narcissist. And I'm not going near like whether he's diagnosed or not. He's not diagnosed, but let's leave the diagnosis out and the pathologization of narcissism. But his behavior, now I can recognize it for what it is. I can appreciate and massively taking responsibility for my part in that. But there's a limit, and no one deserves, I think it's fair for people to be hurt and upset at the end of a relationship and want some kind of, closure, whether that's however that is, or some kind of way to feel that, I don't know what the word is, but you know what I mean, but validated, I guess, in their hurt. But to, over a long period of time, for a sustained effort of abuse and trying to tear someone down constantly, that's not okay. That's not okay for anyone.
Yeah, and it's certainly not nice to be on the receiving end. And something I'm observing now is, because she can't get to me in any way, shape or form, really emotionally, apart from affecting the children. And that's a very different scenario to deal with.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell the children the truth, and you don't want to lie to them.
Yeah. It is,
which then puts you in a difficult position.
Yeah. And I think especially if you're in your shoes as the man, because there's so much more pressure on you to be like the man and the father. I think women traditionally are seen as the victims. So it's easier for them to get more sympathy and support and so on. I think it's much
Yeah.
harder in a man's position to get that.
Even if there's no animosity, there's no breakup, there's no divorce, even in a loving couple just going through life. I remember listening to Dr. Anna Machin on, I think it was a Guild of Dads podcast, and when she had her, I think it was a second baby, but there was a very traumatic birth, and they were in the point where either it's going to kill the baby, or it's going to kill her, or it's going to kill both. So going through that experience, luckily they survived, and she had all this support, and the support for the baby and everything else, and she sat there thinking, my husband has just had the trauma of watching all this play out. Who's offering him any support?
Yeah,
Nobody.
Support there?
So she actually dug into what support was available for men and wrote a book about it, and there was nothing.
That's shocking, isn't it?
It is.
Especially
in a man's world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is sad, and I really hope things are turning, but it's turning too late for many people. It's sorry, off. Yeah, it's difficult. It's really difficult.
Yeah,
and I think that's when I mainly, it's more of a marketing thing. I speak to women when I market myself because I'm a woman and I've experienced it as a woman. And most of my clients are women, but I'm very happy to work with men. And actually, since I've niched into divorce for women, I'm actually working with more men than I ever have, because they do still identify with what I'm saying.
yeah,
And it's not always just a role reversal. It's way more complex than that. So the men I work with, I love working with them. I finished with a client recently, and in his last session, he wanted to focus on what do I do when and what do I do if, all related to his children.
yeah,
And it was really nice because I'm not a parenting coach at all. I make mistakes all the time with my kids, but I can tell him as a mother of, or as a parent of children that have been through a divorce, what to do when they meet someone new, what to do when you meet someone new. He can hopefully learn from the mistakes I made when I met someone new, things like that. And just the fact that he wanted to put in place and plan for the emotional stability for his kids, who are very young at the moment. But that was just so humbling. Just thought, wow, no ego there, just wanted to do the best for his children. And it was just fabulous, really, really fabulous. We need more men like him.
Yeah, so I guess there'd be questions, and I've asked these questions myself, so I know what they are. Like, if I meet somebody else, when do I introduce them to my children? When I meet somebody else, do I tell the kid's mother that I'm seeing someone else, or do I hide that from her? Do I introduce them?
Yeah, and I don't know if there is a right answer. I don't think I'm the person to advise.
I don't think there
what
is.
We did.
Yeah.
I mean, I met my who was my boyfriend 9 months after I broke up with my ex-husband, and he wanted to approve him before he met the children. And he did. He came and met him. It was very awkward because we were in the marital home and my ex-husband walked in and my boyfriend was making a cup of tea at my ex-husband's sink. So it was very awkward and very embarrassing, and it was over very quickly and it was fine.
Yeah.
But we agreed to a 6-month rule then. It was 5 years ago. The kids were much younger. They were like 9 and 10, I think. He was the first person that either of us had met. He hadn't met anyone, and I hadn't until him. So we agreed to 6 months, and we waited 6 months, and then the kids met him. They never liked him. I should have listened to them more because their intuition was right. And I have asked, did you not like him because he was him, or was it just because he was my boyfriend? And my daughter said, well, at first it was just because he was your boyfriend, but as time went on, I just didn't like him. And then and then there's the whole question, well, how much sort of power do I give to my children? Are they just reacting because they're hurt and upset? And for them, it's like a bit of a nail in the coffin. Well, now the hope is less that mum and dad might get back together. I mean, my kids still say that they hope me and their dad get back together.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? After everything that's happened?
So do mine.
And you're just like, wow,
And they've never experienced us living together. But there's still that
wow.
part that wants
They
that
want that.
family unit.
Yeah. It's and that's really quite devastating, isn't it, when you hear stuff like that?
Yeah.
So that's how we did it the first time. My ex met someone almost exactly at the time where I split up with this guy that I'd been seeing. And I can't remember if he told me or not, or how quickly he told me. She didn't meet the children for a while, but when she did, I didn't have any warning. I was not allowed to meet her. I was told categorically told to stay away from her. This was when he was moving into his hatred of me, which weirdly happened at the same time he met her and at the same time I broke up with my ex. And so what I would advise people not to do is not to just tell their ex when their kids have met them, if that is a particularly harsh day, because my ex decided to tell me on the day of my mother's funeral that my son had met his girlfriend. And frankly, at the end of the day, after burying my mother, that was kind of the last thing I needed to hear.
Yeah.
So, and I do believe 100% it was a calculated effort. He wanted, that was in when he was in his, I want to cause maximum destruction. I'd love to say is I don't think he realised the impact it was having on his kids, but I don't know how he couldn't have realised. So, anyone listening, please don't do something like that, regardless of how angry with your ex you are. Like that, it wasn't fair on my son, ultimately. It wasn't actually fair on his girlfriend. I have nothing against her at all. I do wonder what the hell she's doing, but that's none of my business. And I'm sure if I said that to her, she'd probably slap me around the face or something. But, they've been together nearly 3 years. I haven't ever met her. I've seen her in the car. She's just looked the other way. So I know she's been told stuff about me. I don't need to have a relationship with her. She's not really in my kid's life much. But if she was, then I would ideally like to at least know a little bit and trust a little bit the person that my kids were getting influenced and cared for.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, hopefully she's a positive influence in their life and she cares about them. And I can only be grateful for that. Just feel sorry for her.
Yeah. Our kids were, what were they, 5 months old when we separated. And I was told fairly early on, I am allowed another girlfriend, but I'm not allowed to introduce her to the kids. So, of course, that for me was like red rag to a bull. So the first 3 girlfriends I had after the breakup got introduced to the kids. Then as they started to get a bit older, last thing I wanted was a revolving door of different women and people coming in and out of their lives. So for me, it was unless I believe they're going to be in the children's lives for a long time, they're not getting introduced.
I think that's a really good, that's the way to check it, isn't it?
Yeah. And then when the kid's mother met my partner for the first time, we were going to one of my daughter's theatre performances. So I sent her a message, said, oh, by the way, I am taking someone to see the performance as well. So there was no surprises or anything. Although we did get a surprise because when the kids came out of the theatre performance, they walked straight past their mother and came and gave me and my partner Hannah a hug, which didn't go down very well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, but it is tricky, and I think treat the other person how you would want to be treated. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because it's to do with the children at the end of the day, and because it does impact them. And so I think have whatever that saying is, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, or something from the Bible. Yeah, it's it is kind of common sense, but I think when emotions are heightened, when we're sad, when we're bitter, when we're angry, we can go off track slightly and use it. It's a great punishment. I mean, what better way is there to punish someone? But ultimately, it's not fair on the new person either.
No.
Not fair on anyone. So don't use your new person, people listening. Don't use your new person to get at your old
Or
or
your
your children.
children.
Or your children. Yeah. Put them at the front and centre, I think, 100%.
So you started off with the tapping and coaching around money mindset.
Mm, mm.
What's the importance of that? And what is a money mindset?
Good question. What is a money mindset? I think for me, a positive money mindset is so much more than, because obviously we're entrepreneurs, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners might have jobs, but it's not just, oh, I can charge what I'm worth and I can put myself out there and not be afraid of rejection or people saying, who do you think you are? How much do you charge? What qualifications do you have? All those stories that we have in our head and sometimes have backed up by. I did have my ex-in-laws say those kinds of things to me. But I think it's so much more than that. For me, it's about not being stressed when you don't have particularly enough money. How much is enough is obviously very subjective. It's about not being stressed when my bank balance is at a certain point, and just trusting and knowing that that's going to change. Not completely miraculously, you have to take the action, but coming out of a fear response into a what can I do about this response. Having a positive money mindset doesn't mean to say you have to be a millionaire. And I think actually as time's gone on for me, it's become less about the money and more about the self-worth. What is wealth really me? What does it mean to me? Because I did have quite a privileged life. We did live in a very nice area and a nice house. We had gardeners, I had a cleaner actually twice a week at one point, which was bloody brilliant. And so, we went on nice holidays. We had a really nice life. But actually now I realise that's not what wealth is to me. Wealth is about being able to spend time with those people that you love. Money is, it is because money is, it does make the world go round.
Yeah.
But it's about not being controlled by money, not being led by money, not getting back at people through money. And that's where it led into the divorce stuff so beautifully, because I was mainly working with entrepreneurs and helping them to charge more and charge their worth, I should say. Most entrepreneurs charge less than they should. So that's a big selling point for me. But then actually having to really hold on to my training around money mindset when I was going through my financial negotiations and all the sort of programmed, and this, I think it is, I guess you could turn it on its head the other way around for men having to be sort of the providers, but for women going through divorce having to just be grateful for what they get. Or, well, it's not my money because I gave up and I didn't work. I looked after the kids. He earned the money, so it's his money. And, those kinds of beliefs, having to really, really work on those so that you were brave enough to say, no, that deal isn't fair. Like, morally, that's not fair. It's not just not fair to me. It's actually not fair to society. That's not okay. So that's how the money mindset stuff sort of morphed into the divorce recovery stuff that I do. Because I think most of the women I work with, they and men, the main conflict is over the money. It is, and it's maybe because of the work I do, but it's more about the money and the finances than the children. But obviously the children get wrapped up in that and mixed up with it. So that's how it sort of morphed into the divorce stuff. So initially they look quite separate, but actually they're so linked. And going
definitely.
right back to what we said at the start, they're all related to how you were brought up around money, about how you brought up around relationships, what your parents modelled for you, what you heard, what you absorbed, all the unconscious programming that we receive, all of that just goes really deeply into these two categories. So yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah, exciting. Some of the things I heard as a child when I was a child that didn't necessarily help. Oh, what do you think? Do you think money grows on trees? It's like,
Yeah.
well, money is paper. Yes.
I love it. Yes, it does. Money trees.
And do you think I'm made of money?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the money comes from? And all this, that, and the other. And you sort of looking back, think, well, that's a real scarcity kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So if you've still got that mindset as an adult, you're not going to feel that confident to ask your boss for a pay rise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you know the company down the road is paying £3 an hour more or whatever, you still don't ask.
Yeah, 100%.
And even as men, we have to accept what we're given or do more hours.
Yeah. So that's the other one. The real, like, money doesn't grow on trees. Think I made money. Rich people are bad, or money is the root of all evil. But also, you have to work really hard for money. And I think especially when we've seen our dads work, if we grew up around a sort of typical family back in the day, because we're slightly older than other people, then I saw my dad working really, really, really hard. And I used to think my mum was lazy, to be honest. Especially when I started working, I was like, she didn't work. Like, she just sat around the house all day. But obviously I know now, that having had kids myself, that she didn't do that.
It's a
That's
big
what I
wake-up
used to
call.
thought, yeah. And then, like, applying that to the breakup of my marriage and how women view themselves in general, they've got that subconscious, you have to work really hard to earn money. And they see, oh, well, my husband did work really hard and he earned the money. So we're devaluing ourselves straight away.
Yeah.
And obviously it can be role reversal. And then for the men, it's just like, well, I have worked really, really hard for my money. And they're not valuing the contribution that we did because it wasn't technically a monetary contribution. Yeah. Even though if you actually totaled up, and I've done this in my book that's coming out soon, we probably should be earning between £40,000 and £80,000 a year for all the stuff that we do. If, when I say we, I'm talking about stay-at-home mums that do the majority of care. I know that I am talking about a sort of atypical relationship because that's what I went through. And I know it is a lot more balanced with a lot of other people, which is great. And I'm very, very pleased to hear that. Pleased that it is.
Yeah, I think when you look back at how life was, shall we say, pre-1960s, some would say it was easier because you knew that if you're a bloke, you're going to go out and you're going to go to work and you've got to provide for your family. And if you're a woman, then you're going to be having kids and being a homemaker. And looking into the work of John Gray, when he talks about that versus now, he says back then women would suppress that inner masculine, but the men would also have to suppress their inner feminine. And then with the feminist movement, we've switched that, and it's now kind of gone the other way, where women are suppressing the feminine and men are suppressing the masculine because they don't want to be labelled as toxic or anything like that. Whereas really we need to find that balance between the two.
Yeah, we really do. Yeah.
Because I think women are working hard, especially if they're a single mum, or even if they're not single, they go out, they go do the work, they come home and still have to do all the stuff that the housewife would have done back in the 50s. And the men are still doing the same work, but they've also got to come home and do some of the stuff around the house. So both sides are knackered.
Yeah.
It's just not...
Ultimately.
they're not seeing things from the other perspective.
Yeah. And I think, I quite often say divorce is underrated, partly because you do get some time off from the children, so you can have a life separate from them. But also because I think, like, if I meet the right person now who has a very active role in his children's life, he now has so much more of an understanding of what it takes. Like, because he has them more often, he has to do the running around, he has to do some of the lifts, whereas you probably didn't have to do that before. And again, I'm generalising. But, like, so I know now that he has more appreciation for maybe women in general or for what I do. And I also have more appreciation for him because I can see he's got a successful business or a successful job or whatever. He works really hard and he does that. So it's you're already at a point where you've got so much more mutual appreciation for each other from the get-go. which I think, it's not like this sort of competition of who's doing the most and who's put the bins out and, well, I've done that and I've done that. It's not this chore competition or this sleep competition. Well, you had 8 hours and I got up with baby, or, that's not there. So it's so much. And I know second marriages often fail. The stats are even worse than for first marriages, and for third marriages, they're off the scale. But I think if you do the healing work so that you haven't got any chips on your shoulders anymore, and then you can come at it, you can really meet in the middle in a much more sort of grounded, understanding, mutual respect place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the other thing I find when dating after divorce as a single parent, you can also get an idea of how they're going to react and integrate with your children by seeing how they react and integrate with theirs.
Yes.
Because I must admit, if I knew what my kids' mum was going to be like with the kids before we'd had kids, we wouldn't have kids.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, yeah, and why don't we take more notice of this? It's really interesting, isn't it? Because the person I met after my husband, I thought he was a good dad, but there were some really big red flags that I witnessed firsthand. I didn't just hear about, I actually witnessed that the way he spoke to his daughter a couple of times, that should have been a way bigger red flag than it was. And by the end of the relationship, towards the end, it was, I did say to him one day, your daughter is scared of you, because he was basically just being such an arse. And no one had ever told him that before, and he couldn't bear it. And I think I put one of the final nails in the coffin myself, one of the many final nails, but it was true. And for me, that was one of the reasons I was like, I'm really starting to realise that maybe you're not the guy for me, because not only are my kids not particularly enamoured with you, you've shouted at my son across a campsite and called him a loser because he fell off his bike, which you thought was funny but actually really upset him. You've scared your daughter so she won't even go on a bike ride with you. And my daughter just doesn't like you because she's very tuned in and she gets people. She's very intuitive, and she's also very harsh, which is where, I had to be careful. But I wish I'd listened to her earlier. I really do. Yeah. So not doing that again.
I think when we're kids, we all have that strong sense of intuition for personal safety. But well-meaning adults, mainly teachers and parents and aunts and uncles and grannies and grandmas and all the rest of it, condition it out of you.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it?
Just by repeating what they heard when they were children.
Yeah. It's I hadn't thought about what I've just told you for a while, actually. And I think that was one of the massive turning points, because it's kind of like a wake up. I was so blind to it for such a long time because I hadn't done the healing work around my divorce and my relationships and my sort of reliance on a man, I guess. My desire not to be single, my desire to be looked after and have a strong man in my life. I hadn't healed those parts of me. So I was clinging on to something that wasn't right. Should have done the healing work first. But on the other hand, he kind of forced me to do it. So I look at it as a semi-good thing.
6 of one and half a dozen of the other, as they say.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So you mentioned the divorce rates, and I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to this. And what I found really interesting is that around 65% of heterosexual divorces are filed by women.
I think it's higher than that.
It could well be. And you think, hang on a minute, men must be really messing up. So let's take the men out of the equation and look at the lesbian divorce rates.
Oh,
so there's no man there at all, and they're 75 to 85%.
Wow.
Of lesbian marriages end in divorce.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It is, isn't it?
And I wonder, though, if there's more of those marriages that are second marriages, because the second marriage rate is Massive.
Yeah. And interestingly, the gay men divorce rates are really, really low.
Wow, how interesting.
That could be because there's a lot less emotion involved.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. Well, gosh. Oh, wow, we could go down the right hole here, couldn't we?
We certainly could.
Let's
But,
hypothesize.
yeah.
Yeah. Or
And
is it because men part with more? And women have got this thing now is like, I'm not putting up with this anymore. Like, I think that's the feminist
could be
wave
that as well, yeah.
is maybe, I don't know, maybe men feel more trapped. Maybe there's less of an imbalance because they're two males rather than traditional male female, like we've been talking about. Oh, I'd love to see some studies on that. That would be so interesting.
Yeah. And one thing I find really, really interesting digging into these stats on the Office of National Statistics, nowhere on that site does it say that the first time divorce rate is nearly 50%.
Does it not?
It doesn't, no.
Wow. Because it
And if
is
you
now,
do
isn't
find
it?
it, please share it with me.
But that is the rate now, isn't it, that people are
Well,
saying?
that's what people are saying, but it's not on there.
And what is the divorce rate for first time marriages on
It
there?
it
But
doesn't
they claim.
actually say.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because it used to be, I know, so my husband had a friendship group and there was 7 of us. And it used to be 1 in 7. And we always used to like sort of joke about it and say, oh, they'll be first. And they were. And then it went down to 1 in 6. And then another couple broke up. Then it went down to 1 in 5.
Yeah.
And then we broke up. And then one other couple broke up after us. So it's like, oh, they're beating the odds now because there's now 3 couples that are still together. But technically that should only be 1.5 or whatever the stat,
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, and that this is over 20 years. So it's a fair amount of time, but we were completely aligned with the statistics. So maybe their stats are right. Maybe it's 1 in 3 or 3 out of 7 or whatever it is. Well, 3 out of 7 is under 50%, isn't it? So who knows? I'm not making much
Yeah.
sense now. I'm not great with numbers, but you know what I mean. Like it's definitely come down, and to the point where I'm like, I mean, would I ever get married again? Like, I don't want to risk those stats. Are my kids getting married? My daughter jokes, "Oh, I'm not getting married," but then she also says, we talk about her wedding, and so who knows? I don't know. She says she doesn't want to bring kids into this world because it's so awful, but then other times she says she can't wait to have a baby. Not too soon, darling. Please, you're very young. But
I know that feeling.
yeah. So yeah, gosh, yeah, really interesting, really
It is,
interesting.
yeah. And so, thought I had a while back is a lot of the time, annually, if not more, we take our car and get to the garage, get it serviced to make sure it doesn't break down. We get a
Mm,
gas boiler inspected or serviced so that it doesn't break down. We don't do that with our relationships or
mm,
marriages. And something else I've noticed is a lot of couples spend more time planning the wedding day
mm,
than the years of marriage that follow that.
yeah, and then the house remodeling, or choosing a school, or even choosing a nursery,
Yeah.
and which are obviously quite important, but I don't think a nursery is important. Schools maybe, but yeah, it's quite shocking, isn't it? I mean, and did you go to marriage guidance or we
Um,
went twice?
I came home to an empty house. I didn't have a lot of choice.
Right. Okay.
I think at that time, my ego wouldn't have allowed it to
Mm,
happen.
mm,
As that same ego blocked social services getting involved and looking into what's going on between the mother and the children. That's just in
mm,
the first 5-6 months.
mm,
Once before they even came home from hospital. And
mm,
it's like
God.
looking back, think, well, actually, would that have been a bad thing now? But
Mm,
who knows?
easy in hindsight, isn't it?
It is indeed. But I think from the feedback I've heard from other people with marriage guidance counselling, you may have a different take on it because you've experienced it. It focuses a lot on the problem, how you feel about the problem, and very little in the way of a solution.
I think it very much depends, as with anything, who your marriage guidance counsellor is.
Yes.
And we didn't really choose one. We just went to Relate, and they gave us one. So we went twice. The first time it was good, but it was very much putting a sticking plaster on stuff, exactly as you say. And then the second time we went, we had a male counsellor actually, which I thought, do you know what? Actually, this is really good because he's going to listen to him a bit more. And funnily enough, I know he only lives down the road now because I've moved since. Because he has a spotty car and I know exactly where he lives. We used to call it Mr. Tumblehouse. But yeah, he was amazing, and I would recommend him to anyone. If I knew who he was, but he called my ex out. He called me out and stuff as well. He called my ex out on quite a few things, and my ex turned into the man that I had always wanted. And I remember saying to his mum, honestly, he's the man I've always wanted. I can't fault him. He's amazing. We're finally in the place we should have been like years ago. But he just couldn't keep it up. He couldn't sustain it. And he tried, bless him. I don't know how hard he tried. I don't know whether it was really impossible for him, or he made the decision that he couldn't be bothered, or he didn't want to, or it was just too hard. But it wasn't sustainable. So you could say it saved my marriage. Or you could say all it did is prolong, a diseased, terrible thing, made it a bit better for a while, but the wheels came off eventually. Yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting. So I think people should definitely give it a go. And I think the sad thing is a lot of people go when it is too late because it's last resort territory.
Yeah.
I do think, if I was to get married again or potentially even ever move in with someone, I would want to have an external person sort of not assessing our relationship, but doing some kind of work, even if not with someone else, but together to say, okay, how compatible actually are we? What are and you should be having these conversations anyway, just through my ex-husband and I, we were really aligned on our life goals. And what we wanted out of life and so on. But then we just became different people. And I wanted to feel loved, and I wanted to feel like once the kids were older and left home, I would still really enjoy spending time with my husband. And we came back from holiday once and I just thought, I don't want to spend any time with you. So it was really sad. So marriage guidance counselling, I think it's really, really brilliant. It can save marriages, and I think at least if nothing else then you feel like you've tried. And I know, hand on heart, I can say I tried absolutely everything before I threw in the towel with my marriage. I really did. So I can, and I'm proud of that. I don't ever need to look back and go, oh, if maybe I'd done that, or hadn't done that. Because I tried everything and it wasn't meant to be. I was probably flogging a dead horse for a bit longer than I should have done.
It's easy to do though.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is not so much now, but certainly when I was a kid, there was a lot of stigma around divorce and divorce being a failure or a failed marriage. And the only way it's a failure is if you believe it is, I think. Because for me, it gave me the gift of my freedom back.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to meet somebody who actually wants to be in a relationship.
Absolutely. I think there's much less shame around it now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still judgment. There's still people that want to know all the gory details and put their own spin on it and get involved in gossip. But generally, I don't think anyone should feel like ashamed of it or embarrassed or anything. I'm involved in a community of Asian women, and it's very, very different for them. Like the shame that they have from their families. Obviously, I'm involved in the women, especially the women. There's a lot of abuse that goes on that's very, very under, behind closed doors. It's that the in-laws are very, very involved in. It's shocking. It's like they have me in tears sometimes when we meet, because the extra level of crap that they have to go through, and the rejection from their own families a lot of the time, as well as their in-laws, is just horrendous. And it feels like it's sort of a magnifying glass onto what it used to be like for people in general, like for, privileged white middle class people. They're still suffering, and I'm sure there are other cultures as well. I'm not picking them out specifically, but they're the people that that I've seen this happen to. And it's really heartbreaking, because it shouldn't, we're breaking through, we're breaking the mold, so to speak, but it's extra hard for them.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, I've worked with some of them. Not necessarily the same people, but certainly people from Asia and India and all that kind of area of the world. So, you mentioned you've got a book coming out.
I have, yes. So, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Go for it.
It has a swear word in the title. It's called Money, Marriage and Motherhood: How Not to Get Fucked Over. What you can't afford not to know. That's obviously the strapline. It'll be a massive title. And I know it leads with money, marriage and motherhood, but it is for men as well. And obviously gender neutral and same-sex marriages and so on.
Everything in between.
Yes, exactly. And it is like, I've genuinely written it. I mean, I have to admit, when I started it, I was on a bit of a rant. I've had to change it. It's been through a lot of editing, hence why it's taken me so long. But it is like, if everyone could read this book before they get into the stage where they're moving in together with someone, it protects the male as well as the female, or those people in the different roles, I should say. So, it's future proofing your relationship. For example, let's take pensions as an example. The man could say, well, she's given up work, I'm just going to carry on paying into my pension. But actually, why don't you pay into hers as well? Because she's not earning any money. Why shouldn't she build a pension at the same time as you? Because then if you do break up, you don't have to give her half of your pension, because she's already got one. So it's actually saving you money. And if you don't break up, then you've both got a pension, and you'll be better off when when you both retire. So it's kind of a no-brainer. And it's changing the view of, what I'm trying to do is change the view of, it's my money because I earned it and you didn't, so therefore it's not your money. Because I think that is the biggest, most empowering thing that that I've had to deal with, and that loads of my clients have had to deal with. So, and that's genuinely, I'm not trying to steal out of the pockets of men to give to women. I'm trying to get people to look at this so it's fair and balanced. Hence the reason I mentioned earlier, I've worked out what what the stay-at-home person would earn if you had to employ someone to do everything that they do. It's a lot of money. Yeah.
It is indeed. And then on the flip side, if she's home alone or he's home alone looking after the kids, if that partner wasn't there bringing home that money and paying the bills and whatever else, they have to provide that income as well.
Yes.
It really should be a teamwork as a household thing.
Yes, exactly.
When I did T. Harv Eker's Millionaire Mind Intensive, it's about 12 years ago now, I think.
Oh, cool.
He talks about having, you have that much income, so you put that much for long-term savings for spending, that for your retirement fund, that for you live off sort of 50, 60% for him and her to spend on whatever they want, and you cannot say anything about it.
Yeah.
If they want to go and spend that 10% having the hair and nails done, zip it.
Yeah.
If he wants to go out on spend it on fishing gear or guitars or alcohol, zip it.
Yeah, 100%. Love it. Yeah, I love him. He's brilliant. Yeah. I haven't been to his live stuff. I've done his book and stuff, which is actually a recorded live version. But yeah, I bet that was an amazing experience.
It was, yeah, quite a bit sales from the stage, but not
Yeah,
as much as Tony Robbins. But that's
that's good.
par for the course.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
interestingly, I got to talk to the CEO of a financial education company a few years ago, and he grew up on the streets in Chicago and became a millionaire. And he's also a pastor. And one of the things he said that struck me, he says, I've met a lot of wealthy men whose relationship is a mess. He says,
Mm.
where's the success in that?
Mm.
And he says, I know a lot of spiritual people, very religious, they have a great family, but they can't afford to feed the family.
Mm.
He says, where's the success in that?
Mm.
It's like, actually, he's got a very good point.
Yeah,
The success is in being able to balance those two or more effectively.
yeah, 100%. So important. Which is another reason why I think divorce is underrated, because it kind of gives us a kick up the backside to look at all
Yeah.
those things. Hopefully. Not for
Yes.
everyone, but hopefully.
Interestingly, in my second book that's coming out this year sometime called Winning the Game of Love, which is the yellow one on the banner behind me, there's a chapter in there called The Gift of Divorce.
Ah, love it. Awesome. Yeah, because it can be. Yeah. Especially once you get through the other side of all the trauma and the hurt and all
Yeah.
of those kinds of things, then it can be a gift, 100%. Yeah.
And what do you think is behind all of the relationship challenges that we have today?
I think do you know what? I think one of the main things is mobile phones, because people are always on them. People are always contactable. So you never get that time when you're just with your partner, when you can shut off everything else. There's always an interruption. There's always something going on. It's really easy to access. Like, I guess we could go into the whole porn discussion. It's really easy to get onto secret dating websites, or even not secret dating websites, but if your partner's never going to be on them, and then you can be, because you won't get found out. It's just it's easy. I remember when Facebook, or I remember it was Friends Reunited that I think preceded Facebook, and all these people were like getting together from that, fancied each other when they were at school, and they'd met on Friends Reunited, and they're all running off with each other. Like, that was the beginning of it. That happened, it's just like the way of the world. So I think mobile phones and modern day, internet access, I think, has a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
I think, like we said, the economic pressures on couples, where you can't have these. It's very hard to have these more traditional roles. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't have them anyway, but it's very hard to have them. So then you get into the competition of who's working and who's not. And so, yeah, what was the question, Alan? I've forgotten now. What's the hardest? What's the biggest challenge?
What do you think could be behind the mess of relationships today?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it is. In some ways, I don't think it's a bad thing that we now want to sort of stand up for ourselves. And in some ways, I don't think that's wrong. I think it's a great thing that we want to value ourselves, and we're not prepared, a lot of us, to settle. But I do think sometimes that moves into, I'm not willing to compromise on anything. And it means people give up too soon.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, it's like, well, a lot of people don't give up when they should have done. So I caveat that one hugely. I think there's just so much pressure, and a lot of it, and the reason I love doing money and divorce, a lot of it comes down to money and that economic pressure and arguments around that, and having to give our kids everything and all that kind of stuff. So there's just so much. And I do think it's not to say that there were no challenges in the past, but people were a bit more stuck then. They were a lot less mobile. It was my lifetime that women were allowed bank accounts. They weren't allowed bank accounts before I was born, and mortgages. I can't remember I've got it in my book. I can't remember the exact dates. But if a woman wasn't allowed a bank account or a mortgage, how the hell was she supposed to be independent? She didn't have a choice but to get married. So, it's there's a lot of good things that have come about with, the changing of times, but then there's a lot of other challenges as well.
Yeah, I think the mobile phone thing is a big challenge. Yes, you can connect with anybody anywhere, and if it wasn't for that technology, we wouldn't be doing this right
We're
now.
doing this.
But at the same time, the teenagers are, well, not just teenagers, like 6-year-olds upwards,
Yeah.
walking along, head down, looking at a screen,
Yeah.
and with 5 other people walking along, head down, looking at a screen, and think, what's that all about?
Yeah. How are there not more people getting run over, falling down potholes, and bashing into each other? That's what I don't get. I know I'm making light of it, but like I just see these kids,
Yeah.
and I do think we're going off track slightly here, but I've got arthritis in my hands. I know it's much worse when I'm texting. I can, like, just moving my thumb like that, it hurts. My kids, and so most the whole of the world that use mobile phones, are going to have arthritis in their hands. They're going to have curvature of the spine. I just dread to think, it's not just obesity and the brain damage that we're doing from the lack of social interaction and all those things and all the, terrible things we're
Depression,
absorbing.
anxiety.
Yeah, it's like physically we're going backwards to look more like apes because we're getting all like this, and I'm just like, oh my god, we're just basically ruining ourselves, aren't
Yeah.
we? It's very depressing.
Yeah. So
Don't do that,
sometimes
guys.
we can be like sat on the sofa with my partner, and we're both there looking at the screen. It's like, what's it showing each other? Because the feeds are both different, because we have clicked the like button and share button in various different ways. And then sometimes, like, hang on a minute, what am I doing? Put
Yeah.
the phone down. And sometimes I might wind her up a little bit and take her phone off her as well and put that down and have a proper conversation.
And that's one, not one thing, but one of the many things I adore about my new man, is that he just doesn't bother about his phone. It's so
Yeah.
nice. And he does call me out because I can get sucked in without even realising. It goes off, I check a message quickly, and then suddenly I'm like being pulled into
Yeah.
the vortex. And he's like, oh, disappearing down Facebook again, Facebook hole.
Yeah.
Oh my God, sorry. So
Go
I'm
on to
becoming...
then you go on to LinkedIn to put a business post on there, and then 3 hours later,
Yeah. You still haven't posted, you've just read loads of other stuff.
yeah, yeah. So when I tell my kids that years ago there were no phones, so if I called my girlfriend, I'd probably have to speak to her parents first, and if she was there,
Yeah.
and then, or if you wanted to read her a letter, and 3 days it'll take to get there, and it might get a reply 3 days back.
Yeah.
And now, if you haven't got a text message back within 30 seconds, we start going bananas. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is, isn't it? We don't stand a chance.
Well, we do. The kids, I'm not so sure, because it's all they've known.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And when we're not modelling the behaviour, how can we possibly expect our kids to have any kind of positive influence? Because they've got so much going on externally, they at least need it from us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the parents are that busy because they've got that much to do, it's so easy to use an electronic device as a babysitter.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Don't do that.
Do that. I can't say that I don't, but
I
don't. I also believe you've got a program coming up.
I have. I've got my divorce recovery program, Finding Your Way Back to You. It goes live, I think it's the 9th of May. So I'm starting to recruit. Well, I already am recruiting. I've got people in it ready to go now. Any of my one-to-one clients get my groups included. It just enables us to go deeper on a one-to-one basis on their personal things. But the group is still really, really amazing. I'm not one of those coaches that says, oh, this group is, the answer to everything. It's not, because I do think ideally you want to be doing the one-to-one work. But it's really, really, I'm really excited about it. It's going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
And I hope it's quite a unique offering. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I think these group workings and workshops and live events are very good for the surface level stuff. Maybe the first few inches under the water level or under the surface, but to really go down into the depth,
Yeah,
and get to the root causes of things, and get past those ego barriers. And you've really got to do that on a one-to-one basis. You really do struggle to do it on your own.
oh yeah, doing it on your own, I think, is nigh on impossible. I think if you can continue stuff on your own,
Yeah.
or at least have some check-ins. One of my clients, I see her only once a quarter because we've worked together for long enough now. That's just enough to keep her topped up. But yeah, I think you can do a certain amount with a group, 100%. But to do, as you say, to do the deeper work, ideally one-to-one. I limit the numbers in my divorce program, so it does enable us to go quite deeper than I think a lot of things go. It's not just hey, let's just, big ourselves up and be all motivational. We do some of the deeper healing on it, which can get quite emotional. So my calls are 90 minutes. They're not just an hour, as we don't get through it all. And also one thing that I offer, which is partly why I limit the numbers, is anyone that is getting really triggered through that process, which hopefully I'm managing and stopping from happening. And if it does happen on the call, I can deal with it. But I've always genuinely got that open door for all of my clients. I'm suffering, I was triggered by the last call, or this has just happened and it's made me feel like this. I can't go into private coaching them all, but I can give them some guidance or say, okay, let's jump on a 10-minute call and I'll give you some actions. Or if we have, one of the things I offer is my group clients, they do get one-to-one session with me. And if that, usually it's at the end of the program, but if that needs to be in the middle, then that's okay too. Yeah, so it's good.
So what do you feel the future has in store for you?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Well, hopefully more podcasts, because they are like the loveliest, most enjoyable way of getting clients. Which isn't the main reason I do them. I do them because I like, helping to spread the word and giving free content out, because I know that is a help to a lot of people. But yeah, so growing the business, just so that I can help more people. Obviously, the extra income is always nice. I just want to make sure that I carry on holding my head up high. I think it would be really easy when you've gone through the majority of your trauma to just go, oh, thank God that's over. But when I was going through it, I was so dedicated to helping others, and I don't want to lose that equally. And I don't want to feel like I have to be battling, and I have to do it from a sort of angry motivational space. I want to do it from I know I can help people, and so just continue to get the word out there, hopefully inspire, help, heal other people, and build my business and get my family, me and the kids. If someone else is involved in that, great. If they're not, then I know now that we're okay on our own. We're absolutely fine, and that's how I always wanted to feel. So if there's anyone else in there additionally, great, but I know now there doesn't have to be. And as long as my kids are okay, and my dogs, to be fair, I'm looking at them now on the sofa, as long as we're all right, then we're okay. But just getting out there and helping more people.
Excellent. So if you could pick up a magic telephone and call a younger version of yourself, either when you were in your marriage or before you got married, what would she need to hear from you today?
Oh, if it was me when I was in my marriage, I think it would be, try everything like I know you're going to anyway, but speed it up a bit so you don't waste quite as much time. Because I'm really grateful that I did try everything. And I'm very accepting that it did take a long time. And we had a trial separation even, and obviously we went to marriage guidance counselling twice. But, and actually, biggest piece of advice, get the finances done legally and don't just trust. Don't trust your ex, because when money's involved, the trust just has to go out the window, sadly. Yeah, so I think those two, speed up the process, the whole process. And yeah, don't trust too much, because it does sometimes come back to bite you. Get the finances sorted legally, and get the emotional support you need while you're going through it, because that I can't imagine not having it. Just, yeah. And it makes me really sad that so many people don't.
Love it.
Thank you.
So, for me to fully understand you and where you're at today, what would I need to know about your child?
You'd need to know my childhood was actually all right. It was fine. But there were parts of it that really damaged my feelings about myself and my sense of self-worth, from, I think, feeling like a disappointment the second I was born, because I truly believe that my parents wanted a boy. I know my sister always told me I ruined her life the day I was born. She was the middle child. Well, she was the youngest, and then she wasn't. So those hurts and those, I was in a abusive relationship when I was 16. I left home. Lots of issues with my mum. She didn't believe me that he'd been physically abusive towards me. That had a massive impact on our relationship. So yeah, I have been really hurt by, especially my mum. And I think I had to heal those wounds. My mum and I, we had we were fine, but there was kind of this thing. And when she died, I we had a really nice goodbye. And I said everything I needed to say, but in a really loving way. And I said, it is okay, Mum. You don't have to stay here for us. We're going to be all right. And I knew then that it was from such a heartfelt place, because I had done the healing. I hadn't just let it eat away at me. And I can now look back at my childhood and really see the joys that we had and the great times that we had, the holidays and the fun. Whereas before, I think about my childhood and think about that time and that time and that time when, all the negatives. And generally, I don't do that anymore. I know it happened, but I haven't got it doesn't have the emotional connection and impact on me anymore. Which I just thank God, because I could have carried that forever, like my mum did and her mum before her. So I've done a lot of generational healing as well. So, does that answer? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I find the generational stuff very, very interesting and mind-blowing at the same time. Because during the COVID period, I got introduced to kinesiology.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And one of the things I looked at with that is, now bear in mind this online just with a pendulum, and one of the things I looked at was the feeling of I don't matter. But that was nothing to do with me. That went back 6 generations to 1850 to a girl on Dad's side of the family that got pregnant and had the baby taken off her.
Oh, God.
And she wanted to keep it.
Yeah.
So it's like, once you realise it's nothing to do with me, then it just goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's bizarre.
Yeah. And you just think, how did my body know that? Because I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do family constellations.
My parents didn't know
it. Yeah. It's amazing, like family constellations, all that kind of subconscious feelings, and generational healing is like mind-blowing. Yeah. So I do bring that in when I can with clients as well.
That's why I had to learn to be a kinesiologist myself. It's like, I need to do this.
Yeah. It's epic. Oh, I'm so pleased you're doing that. That's great. Really good.
So, if anyone's listening to this and would like to know more about you, how can they find you?
They can email me, liz@theeftcoach.com. They can look at my website. Got some great testimonials on there. That's theeftcoach.com. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. TikTok. Instagram and TikTok I need to focus more on, so I'm starting to do that now. But I won't give you my, if you just put in, I have changed my name recently. So it was Liz Hancock. So if you do a Google search, Liz Hancock EFT, all my SEO will hopefully kick in. It might not do if you do a Google search yet for Liz Harrington, but hopefully in time, then that will be just as effective. Yeah.
Awesome. And all this will be in the show notes anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Because sometimes if you're listening to the audio stuff, the platforms don't always put all the show notes on there, which is rather useful. Anyway, aside from that, final question.
Okay.
And I don't tell anyone about this question because I like to have the most authentic answer as possible. Now, you may feel like you've already answered it in a different way earlier in the call, and that's fine. So the question is, as this podcast is called Relationship Revolutions, what is one thing from your perspective that would bring a revolution or evolution to the world of dating and relationships?
If people did the inner work and the healing before they went out dating again, then I think that would cause a revolution.
Excellent. Or even before they went out dating for the first time.
Well, ideally, yes. But certainly, definitely after a divorce.
Yeah. Certainly before you walk down the aisle.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so true. I agree with you every word. Yeah, thank you.
On that note, Liz, it's been an honour and a pleasure having you on, and I'm sure we'll see you in the online space in the very near future.
Thank you, Alan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for listening. And if you haven't already, please leave me a review on your preferred podcast platform. Click the like button and also subscribe so that you get the new episode notifications. I'm curious, what did you take away from this episode? Please share your takeaways with me. Send me an email to relationship-revolutions@theloveengineer.rocks.